Aaron, President Trump calls you and says, like, what are the things that you think are the principles of immigration reform for you?
I really think securing the border and getting rid of criminals in our country, it's just so basic that this doesn't have to be complicated. The left pretended it was overly complicated and that it was something we couldn't deal with, but we're already seeing the consequences of this. And to the point of what we were talking about earlier with pricing, people have acted like there's no consequence in our country to having illegals, as if the only cost is your avocados cost more or they cost less. And that's it. That's the zero-sum game here. And we know that's not true, exactly to the point of yesterday passing the Laken Riley Act.
The biggest mistake I think, like, each party makes when they get control is punting on issues. Like right now, we have 2 years. We know we control everything. Jam the key things through, because we don't want to lose the House, potentially the Senate, God forbid. And then we don't have the opportunity to fix it. And the Dems are now at the table talking about making everybody a citizen. All right, guys, a very somber Thursday today. Last night, an American Airlines passenger jet hit a Army Blackhawk helicopter, resulting in complete loss of life over the Potomac River in Washington, D.C. The response, pretty epic. For me, it's somewhat personal. I fly in and out of that airport, but I also live right near it. I hear those helicopters go up and down and by all day. When I land, I usually will text my wife on final approach. And I was listening to one of the passengers, or one of the family members of a passenger last night, heading over saying, I got a link from my wife, because as you get close, you get Wi-Fi back. She had texted her husband saying, I'm on 20 minutes out, and never heard back. A very sad day. The government responding immediately. And it was interesting. Yesterday, Sean Duffy, the new Secretary of Transportation, officially sworn in, hitting the ground running, unfortunately. Pete Hegseth, the Department of Defense Secretary, he's briefing as well. President Trump, he had an opportunity to address the nation. Take a look.
The work has now shifted to a recovery mission. Sadly, there are no survivors. This was a dark and excruciating night in our nation's capital and in our nation's history, and a tragedy of terrible proportions. As one nation, we grieve for every precious soul that has been taken from us so suddenly. And we are a country of, really, we are in mourning. This has really shaken a lot of people, including people, very sadly, from other nations who were on the flight.
Anyway, we'll keep an eye on this as we go forward. A lot of additional action on Capitol Hill today. RFK was in front of the Senate Finance Committee. Today, he's in front of the Senate Health Committee, Health, Education, and Labor Committee. Tulsi Gabbard and Kash Patel also up there. Yesterday, the president signed the Laken Riley Act, his first act as president, signing a piece of legislation. He gave the pen to Laken Riley's mom. It was a pretty great event. It was very symbolic for him to kick off his presidency, signing that piece of legislation, considering all the issues that he's fought for. By the way, tomorrow, my next newsletter comes out. You're going to want to sign up at SeanSpicer.com to get all the insights. Please do that. Before I get to the panel, I want to tell you about two quick things. I know this is weird to understand, but if you think about collection agencies, sometimes you might get a call here and there. The IRS is the largest collection agency in the world and is stepping up its enforcement level. I mean, if you owe back taxes or have unfiled returns, do not wait for the IRS to come. Simply avoiding trouble is not a solution. You need to seek professional help before they come after you. I've told you before, whether it's DOJ or the IRS, the full weight of the federal government is behind these guys when they come after you. So my advice to you is call the best people in the business. That's the folks at Tax Network USA. They literally have a preferred direct line to the IRS. They know how to get in touch with them, who to talk to, and who to avoid to help you get through the problems that you're having. They've recovered over $1 billion for their own clients. So if you got back taxes, unfiled taxes, talk to the pros at Tax Network. It's absolutely free. They will stop the threatening letters. They will make sure that you are in good hands in dealing with the IRS. Just call 1-800-905-8000 or visit TN USA, Tax Network USA, tnusa.com/Sean Spicer. That's tnusa.com/Spicer. All right. Before we get to the panel, one more quick little update. I've told you guys before, I've made wellness a part of my 2025 New Year's resolution. And right before the new year got kicked off, I sat down with the folks at PhD Weight Loss. They are people that have worked with a lot of folks, high profile, everyday people, including my friend Seb Gorka, and he looks phenomenal, right? I can admit that. I'm cool with that. And when I asked him what he did, he said, I talked to these folks because it's not a fad diet, it's a lifestyle change. And sure it is. They sit down one-on-one with you. You call, you text with an actual nutritionist that holds you accountable, puts a plan together for you to help lose the weight and then maintain it. And that's the beautiful thing about this. It makes it easy by providing 80% of your weekly food straight to your doorstep at no extra cost when the thing kicks off. Like I said, you've got the huge degree of accountability because you're checking in with your nutritionist every week. So it all starts with a simple call. Call PhD Weight Loss at 1-864-644-1900, or better yet, go to myphdweightloss.com. That's myphdweightloss.com to make wellness part of your 2025. All right. I'm excited to kick off our panel discussion today with our friend Bradley Devlin over there, the politics editor of the Daily Signal, our good friend Aaron Wexler, who is the creator behind the viral videos that come out from Non-Lib Take on Instagram, and introducing a person who got a question at the first White House briefing, first one in 4 years, at least according to Karoline in her intro, is the Daily Caller's White House correspondent, Reagan Reese. Reagan, good to see you. Congrats on the question.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you.
Yeah, we may bring that up in a little bit. I just, before we get off on a somber note, and I want to get your initial takes. Obviously, our hearts and prayers go out to the victims of this tragedy that happened last night. But I just want you to address the response to it because this is a political show. Bradley, I'll start with you. How do you think the administration has done responding?
I think it's incredible that the administration has responded so forcefully and actively, given this was literally Sean Duffy's first day on the job as DOT secretary. And of course, Pete Hegseth, very new in his role, trying to figure out exactly what happened to this Blackhawk, what happened to these soldiers. I thought Pete Hegseth's address from his office struck the right tone, was authoritative yet sympathetic. So it's great to see this type of vitality from the administration. And Sean, some people I think disagree with how active the administration can be, particularly on social media about these issues. But of course, what we saw immediately after this happened was a bunch of liberals posting thoughts and prayers with screenshots of Trump's hiring freeze for the FAA, and also the freezing of a commission that's associated with the TSA. And you know this better than I think all three of us, Sean. Like, when you are in a Republican administration and the media and folks on social media attack you like this, you need to be proactive and aggressive, or else the narrative is going to be set and it's going to get away from you. And it's not at all what the country needs. It's a divisive message, and you kind of have to cut through that noise and go directly to the American people. And I think that's what this administration is doing, and they deserve credit for that.
Reagan, as a journalist, how did you see, do you feel like you were getting the information that you needed in the hours that came after this?
Yeah, I feel like I can provide kind of like a behind the scenes look at how the administration responded, because as a White House correspondent, your initial reaction, and as someone who's a part of a very active newsroom, our group chat that we're all in, because we're not in the office at this time, it's late at night, is blowing up, and everybody is sending every piece of information they can find on Twitter. And there's so many conflicting reports. And within 30 minutes, I believe it was, of the crash, White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt is on Fox News, and she was scheduled to go on, didn't cancel her hit. And she was able to confirm some details about the crash, that yes, a plane had crashed into a Blackhawk helicopter, that the president had been made aware of the situation. And then shortly after that hit, we found out that the president had been briefed and was addressing the situation. And I didn't even have a chance to reach out to the White House press office to ask any of these questions, to get information, because they did it so quickly. And I think the real benefit in that is when you get on Twitter, there's so much going on, and people are on the ground taking videos, and having the press secretary be able to address things and confirm as many details as she could in that moment, I think really helped control the emotional reaction and kind of keep things a little bit more contained, which is totally what the nation needs when you face, the first commercial airline accident since 2009. And I believe this is the most fatalities that has happened since a plane crash since 2001, the 9/11 plane crash. And so having that information immediately, I think, was super key and a great response from the administration.
Aaron, the thing that I thought was interesting to me is, I mean, to Reagan's point, you saw Karoline Leavitt. President Trump puts out a statement. Pete Hegseth is in the office this morning, sleeves rolled up behind his desk. He wasn't behind some podium. Sean Duffy was at Reagan National Airport this morning. I felt like, okay, these guys are on it. And like that just showed to me a whole of government response, number one. And two is that these guys, like as much as the media was talking about, the highest qualification was loyalty, that these guys are actually know what they're doing. And I felt reassured in the response.
Yeah, that was my exact response too, which is if this happened just a few weeks ago under the Biden administration, I don't think any of us would trust that we would get the true results or that the cause for the accident, which it seems like a lot of people are pointing to this theory that it was human error and that the guys in the Blackhawk helicopter were looking at the wrong plane and that's how this crash happened. We're going to find out more obviously over the next few days and weeks, but let's say that's the case and it's human error. It feels like sort of the end of a long number of years of DEI and lack of quality control and a lot of sloppiness coming out of the last administration that I just don't know that any of us would feel confident that the issue would actually be fixed. I am also pretty frustrated at the left's response, though, of course, unsurprised, blaming President Trump, as Bradley was saying before, similar to the price of eggs. They're also blaming him for many years of just the deterioration of competence and responsibility with these types of errors. So my, thoughts and prayers to everyone who had family members and friends on those flights. And but yeah, I think we all feel confident that we're actually going to be really turning a corner in how these issues are dealt with.
Yeah. Sean, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
How do you balance in a communications environment striking the right sympathetic tone while also being proactive and active enough and defensive enough to try to combat the media narrative when the media wants to act hostile to you?
Well, I think President Trump yesterday, it was interesting that you bring this up. I mentioned the Laken Riley signing yesterday, and a reporter shouted at him as he's handing the pen to Reagan. Were you in the room then?
I was right next to the reporter.
Okay, so who was it?
It was a reporter from EWTN.
Okay.
I've been thinking a lot about this because I think.
Okay, so why don't you just you were there? Explain like what happened, because I thought it was telling on several levels, and it goes to what Bradley's asking. But you were there, so why don't you explain what happened?
Yeah. So, I mean, the East Room setup, it was in the East Room yesterday where he was signing the bill, and it was set up a bit differently than normal. Typically, how the East Room is set up is that the president will walk right by the press. And so you'll have an opportunity to shout a question at him in more of a contained, intimate environment. But this time, he was going to be entering through the East Room doors and just going straight to the lectern. And that we, as the press, were about 3 rows behind all of the attendees. We were right behind Laken Riley's family. And so we weren't going to pass right by President Trump. And so there had been some questions beforehand, like, is he going to take questions? How is that going to work? And I started to think to myself, is he going to stand from that podium after signing this really emotional bill and kind of point at us? And we're going to ask questions probably about the budget and potentially about the border bill, but also about the confirmation hearings. And so it was dead silent when he was signing that bill. Laken's mom had given a really sad speech. And then the reporter next to me yelled out and asked the president if he would take a question on the budget. And I thought President Trump handled it very well and said, right now is not the time. I know it's an important issue, but right now is just not the time for me to be asking questions or to be taking questions from the press. And there were definitely some groans and some frustration from the crowd in the room that the press would kind of ruin a moment like that, which I completely understand.
Well, so why I thought it was telling to me is two reasons. One is Trump 1.0 would have said, you're a stupid reporter, right? But he said, it's a good question. That just shows to me this continues to believe that he is a very different president than we had the first term. And he's just in so many ways that takes a whole nother show. But then he said, but this is not the time for that. And I thought it was so, he's and this gets to your point, Bradley, he struck the right tone. And so part of it is to provide information, to say, here's what we know, here's who's looking into it, to give them a sense of what's happening, that we're looking into this, this is the state we're at, this is the information that we have, and then be able to calibrate the, hey, I understand your question, but this isn't the appropriate time for this, or we'll get back to you on that. And that takes a level of experience sometimes, because you have to be able to calibrate that and not lash out and be like, you know what, you're a moron for asking that question. Because I think that's the instinct of a lot of people. So it's a good question, and I thought Trump yesterday handled it perfectly. I do want to move on, and I want to talk about nominations in a second. But before I do that, I don't know if you guys have celebrated last night, but there was a big, big event at CNN. Let me just play it for you and show you what I'm talking about. Go.
For the nearly 18 years I've spent here doing the news, people often ask me if the highlight of my career at CNN was at the White House covering Donald Trump. Actually, no. That moment came here when I covered former President Barack Obama's trip to Cuba in 2016 and had the chance to question the dictator there, Raul Castro, about the island's political prisoners. As the son of a Cuban refugee, I took home this lesson. It is never a good time to bow down to a tyrant. I've always believed it's the job of the press to hold power to account. I've always tried to do that here at CNN.
Okay. So, you know what? Even on the way out, he has to, it's always about Jim. And that's the thing that's so interesting. I, me. And it's funny, he announced the Jim Acosta show yesterday after he decided to say that he was getting booted from CNN. And he said, I'm going to be launching the Jim Acosta show. And I couldn't help but think to myself, Aaron, you've always had the Jim Acosta show. It's always been about you. It's always been a show. It's never about, and the idea about truth and all this stuff. He's a carnival barker posing as a journalist.
Yeah, no, I mean, I thought Jim who? I obviously know who Jim Acosta is, but I mean, he had his moment, and he's one of these guys that just won't leave us alone. I don't know how many people cared, except for those of us on the right. Excuse me, bad cough. That we're all getting over that flu that's been going around from inauguration. But it reminded me of when Don Lemon wrote that letter on X declaring his departure, where no one cared except for people who were making fun of him. So, yeah, I mean, pretty classless, pretty ungracious. But it is fitting that in 2025, now that President Trump is back in the White House and we are getting rid of all the parasitical bottom dwellers of society, mostly in government, we're also seeing that happen in places like CNN. So, good luck to Jim. I hope he continues, because we will continue to get a good laugh and a lot of content out of whatever he does.
Speaking of CNN, and you're going to notice a little pattern here for a second. Stephen Miller was on with our other favorite guy, Jake Tapper. And Bradley, I want to play this for you and just get you to react, because to me, this was sort of just, I don't think that Jake saw this coming. Take a look.
Jobs many Americans do not want to do. So how does President Trump make sure that the effort to deport people who are not in this country legally doesn't end up hurting Americans who want safe borders, absolutely, but also don't want to see even more higher prices in groceries?
Well, I mean, I'm sure it's not your position, Jake, you're just asking the question, that we should supply America's food with exploitative illegal alien labor. I obviously don't think that's what you're implying. Only 1% of alien workers in the entire country work in agriculture. The top destination for illegal aliens are large cities like New York, like Los Angeles, and small industrial towns, of course, all across the heartland, as we've seen with the Biden floods. Mm-hmm. None of those illegal aliens are doing farm work. Those 30,000 illegal aliens that Joe Biden dumped into Springfield.
I'm talking about the ones that are.
But I'm explaining this. It's important to understand.
No, you're kind of changing the subject. I mean, I'm talking about the ones.
I will give me 30 minutes. I'll go as deep as you want on this.
We don't have 30
your
minutes.
Audience.
I don't have I'm talking about the ones that work in the agriculture industry.
I'm
you can come back and we can talk about the ones in the cities. I swear.
I'll do the whole answer. The illegal aliens that Joe Biden brought into our country are not full stop doing farm work.
All right, you get the point here. But the point, Bradley, that I think was fascinating about this is that Jake was trying to create a problem, and Stephen's saying, no, we're not going after people who are here legally. We're going people here who broke the law. And those people don't do the work that you're trying to create the impression that they do.
Ugh. You know, come at Stephen Miller at your own risk on the immigration issue. He is a big dog in a small house. Also, on the Acosta front, a lot of people should hire me to do their branding because it should be Jim Accosted. That should be his new show. And now it's other people coming in and asking him hard questions. I love this from Stephen Miller. You want to act as if we're going to treat all migrants equally based on a very small subset of cases. We see this argument repeated over and over and over again on the abortion issue in cases of rape and incest and threats, a life-threatening condition for the mother. We see this repeated, especially with higher skilled immigration, the H-1B visa debate that you and I have talked about before, Sean. Well, there's a whole different classification for immigrants called the O1, and those are your super geniuses, right? But every single time the pro-abortion lobby goes into a regress where ultimately they say, well, we just need the best supercomputer minds in the world, and if we need to get them from India, like they got to come in on an H-1B. No, there's different visas for that. And so Stephen Miller pointing out that this is an incredibly small subsect that does not speak for the whole of the migrant population in the United States is a very important point. Second, do away with all of this myth-making on the left about Americans won't do these jobs. Go back to Econ 101, supply and demand, labor is a market. They won't do the job at the rate that the illegal immigrant population in the United States is willing to do that job for. That applies to agriculture, it applies to construction, it applies to manufacturing. And so by getting illegal immigrants out of the country, of course we need to bring prices down. That means freeing up our energy supply, etc. But to actually restore some purchasing power back to the American people, you need to get the illegal immigrants out so that their real wages can once again rise.
Yeah, I think the thing that I thought was interesting in that, Reagan, was that Tapper, like Stephen's pointing out, so you're okay if prices are low, but we're exploiting people and giving them, barely enough to get by because they're in the I mean, like which one are you for? Because you can't be for both. You're either for Americans getting a good wage to do a job, whether they're legal or illegal, or you're for exploiting cheap illegal labor because you want to get fruits and vegetables in particular cheaper.
I think that these Trump administration officials that keep going on the mainstream media are actually doing them a favor by making interesting moments and keeping probably these networks from completely going under. We see CNN is laying off people, and then Stephen Miller gives this explosive, finally something interesting happening on CNN. And then it was Karoline Leavitt yesterday who was on, I believe, ABC with Michael Strahan, and he asked her, are you worried about making federal workers coming back to the office that you might lose some doctors? And she said, well, doctors typically have to be in the office to do their job. And it was just this incredibly stupid moment. But the problem with all of these journalists is that they really just have extremely big heads. And I'm thinking back about Jim Acosta, and what I see with a lot of my colleagues in the White House is that this is their, and this, Sean, this is their reality TV show. This is their moments of fame, and that gets to their head, and then they think that people care when they rage quit their show, and then they're going to go off and do something independently. And nobody cares. Nobody cares, and people just want journalists who are obsessed with the truth and are not focused on themselves. And that's what's really plaguing all of these networks and why they're just idiots on TV.
All right, you just set me up perfectly. Aaron, I want to show you what senior White House correspondent at CNN did. She has her own show as well. She interviewed Dan Crenshaw about military policy, but this is a perfect lead-in from what Reagan was saying. Aaron, take a look at Caitlin Collins interviewing Dan Crenshaw on transgender policy in the military, and I'd like you just to react to this. Take a look.
But let me ask you about some of the executive orders that Trump has been signing, because you have said that any American who is willing and able to serve in the military should be allowed to do so. Do you oppose Trump's ban on trans people serving in the military?
No, not at all. And I'm not sure where you got that quote, but you could find a lot of other quotes from me that would say that we should never allow anyone in the military to undergo transition surgery, which would make them medically unqualified to deploy and therefore reduce the readiness of the military. So I'm not sure what President Trump is going to do exactly on this policy. It's probably going to look a lot like his last administration, which was you can say that you're another sex, but you can't undergo treatments to become another sex, because once you do that, you make yourself unready to deploy. It's the medical procedures themselves.
But there are trans people who serve in the military right now who would disagree with that.
They can disagree all they want. I'm the one who's, I know what war is like, and I know what it takes to deploy. I was not allowed to deploy for vision issues. Now, what if you need to be on a bunch of medications and your entire body has been changed radically into another gender? It makes it very difficult to deploy you into the places that we need to deploy you. I had to be medically retired for my condition, and my condition arguably is far less severe than undergoing a transition to a different gender.
Okay. Aaron, I'll save my thoughts. Tell me what you think.
Well, there are two things here. First, just in general, with everything we've been talking about with the left-wing so-called media that are so-called reporting on everything, I think they just got used to the last 4 years of never having to be accountable, never having to know facts, never having to have a real argument, because they didn't really have to hear from us. But now that we're in the White House, they actually have to address us. And so Stephen Miller, Crenshaw, whoever it is, Karoline Leavitt, we just didn't get this, this talk time and this stage time before. So that's really exciting to see. And they're realizing they're kind of like the kids who are like the smartest kid in the high school, like, some random high school. And then they finally go to like a good college and they realize they have to work a lot harder on their homework. I think that's what they're realizing right now. On this clip with Dan Crenshaw, I think he's being overly generous. I disagree with him. I don't understand his point of saying that you could say you're another sex, but still serve in the military. That is a mental illness. You are mentally unfit to serve in our military if you believe that you are another sex. And what he's saying is you can't transition. Yeah, I agree with that part of his point. But overall, I just don't understand what he said there. You're not allowed to serve in the military if you have eczema, if you have all sorts of other conditions that I would argue are just, they have you go through, as we all know, go through tests to make sure you're mentally fit. You don't have anxiety. You're not. I don't really. I had not seen that clip before. I'm pretty frustrated by it for him.
But I guess where I look at this is twofold. One is you have Caitlin Collins questioning a retired Navy SEAL, a badass who went to war, lost an eye, and got who was medically retired.
And she thinks she knows better.
She's telling him, yeah, but they say they can serve. I don't, who are you to question his knowledge? And secondly, he's right. There are certain things that happen in the military where they'll medically retire you or where you won't get in the first place. And the idea that he's saying, hey, if you do this, you're going to do things to your body and have to take subsequent drugs that will prevent you from actually doing it. Same reason that Dan got retired, right? That's what happens. We have an annual physical every year and they check you out, kick the tires to make sure that you're still good to go. And if you take certain drugs, meaning even certain prescription drugs or have certain medical conditions that develop during your career, you'll be medically retired. It's not a question of whether you want to serve. The military is not a social experiment. And I just think that the idea, to Reagan's point, that Dan Crenshaw is getting lectured by Caitlin Collins on military service.
For sure. Yeah, my issue is that he just didn't even go far enough, but I definitely agree with your point that he just didn't even go, I think he should have been more severe, but, and I disagree with this idea that you could say you're another sex and still serve in the military.
Right, I think the point he was making there, though, was saying something is one thing, and I get your point, because then you've got to look at the mental, but his whole point was if you're not medically qualified, you're not medically qualified. All right, I want to touch on the issue of immigration. Before I do that, though, guys, I've told you this before, I have learned to really value sleep. And one of the things that I've done and changed in my routine is every night, and I posted this, everyone else asked me, do you ever use the products? I use all of them. Of course I do. I have a scoop of Beams Dream Powder every night. Right before I go to bed, I take it a half hour before, I put a scoop of it in the microwave, 30 to 45 seconds, and put it down. The flavors are unbelievable. I would drink it all day long if I didn't fall asleep, but it's got all natural ingredients in it. Melatonin, magnesium, reishi, apigenin, all the natural stuff in a great tasting thing that's taken by professionals and athletes. And I'm telling you, Once my head hits the pillow, I'm out. I wake up feeling refreshed because it is all natural. If you want to prioritize sleep and a good night's sleep, go to shopbeam.com/Spicer. Use code word Spicer for 40% off. I'm telling you, I love all the flavors. Like they're like kids. You can't choose among them. But I will say that the brownie and the coconut cinnamon one are pretty unreal. So go to shopbeam.com/Spicer, code word Spicer for 40% off your first order. All right. Here's an interesting question that I want to, this is my last media clip, and then I want to get to the immigration thing. There was an interview that Mark Caputo, who's been on the show, he's now at Axios. Reagan's nodding her head because I guarantee you she knows what I'm talking about. But Reagan, he goes on a podcast and talks about his former employer, Politico. And I want to play the clip for everybody.
Another great example when Politico did that terrible, ill-fated headline. 51 intelligence agents or former intelligence agents say that the Hunter Biden laptop was disinformation,
right?
Or bore the hallmarks of disinformation. Turns out that story was closer to disinformation because the Hunter Biden laptop appeared to be true.
But then Facebook also pulled all stories down about the Hunter Biden laptop, and I think Twitter did at the same time too.
Correct. Yeah. They punished the New York Post. It didn't help. I mean, Politico, my former employer, and I knew at the time, didn't do itself any favors. I was covering Biden at the time, and I remember coming to my editor and saying, hey, we need to write about the Hunter Biden laptop. And I was told this came from on high at Politico. Don't write about the laptop, don't talk about the laptop, don't tweet about the laptop. And the only thing Politico wound up writing was that piece that called it disinformation, which charitably could be called misinformation at the least.
All right, Reagan Reese, have you ever been told by an editor at the Daily Caller, don't tweet about something, don't write about something, don't talk about something?
On a news topic, no. As a journalist, we definitely take pride in not trying to dip our toes in activism and to try to stay as middle of the road. And so there are of course social media guidelines and like,
right.
Hey,
but
don't.
It's not like don't talk about a story.
Yeah, no, we go where the news is, and there's never been any type of censorship, and nobody here has ever told me not to cover something because it didn't further some sort of agenda or narrative that we're trying to push, because there isn't one.
All right, Bradley, there's a chart that President Trump put out. I tweeted it out. It shows encounters at the border, and it's unbelievable. I mean, it just drops like a rock the second he took office for a myriad of reasons. I wrote a piece in Newsweek saying, hey, Republicans, let's take advantage of this. There's a lot that our president can do. And President Trump has shown this, like all this gaslighting for the last 4 years that Biden said, I couldn't do this. We now know that that's not true. Clearly, the action that President Trump has taken on deporting criminals and closing the border have worked. But we Republicans need to get comprehensive fixes so that another president doesn't undo what President Trump's doing. I think this is the moment for Republicans to step up.
Completely agree. And I just want to touch on the Politico thing really quick.
Yeah.
Politico's owned by Axel Springer, one of the largest German multinational media companies in Europe. Do you think the Biden administration's support for continental Europe and the war in Ukraine had anything to possibly do with this continued, whitewashing of everything that the Biden family has done? I know we were talking about the laptop and the war in Ukraine hasn't started yet, but this is why they treat the Biden administration with kid gloves. Back to the immigration point. Yes, things need to be done by Congress. It's the truth of our constitutional system that the executive branch and the president has large powers over the immigration system in the United States. That doesn't mean, however, that Congress can't use the power of the purse to create conditions for the executive branch and the DHS to go about enforcing the laws of the country in an effective way. We can fund the border wall. We can provide all sorts of funding for different mechanisms. We can make sure that the asylum process is a thoroughly vetted process. We can make sure that the asylum process is not overwhelmed by invitations into the country by certain left-wing administrations or by certain left-wing lawmakers, whether that's on the state level or the federal level. So yeah, Congress does need action. They didn't need to do anything in order for Biden to stop the bleeding. But if we want to actually make this an inflection point, Sean, as you were saying, we need to make sure that that's followed up with legislation in Congress. Sadly,
Yes.
they're limited. Sadly, they're limited because a lot of this is going to have to be done through budget reconciliation. And so there's all sorts of pretty opaque and complex rules that govern this process in the Senate. Nevertheless, the Senate, by a simple majority vote, can change its own rules on the process. And so maybe Republicans should consider, if they want to make this an inflection point, they need to reconsider the rules so that we can say, hey, we actually do think immigration, or this immigration policy on visas, for example, has a direct budgetary impact. You're just not seeing it in the government's budget. You're seeing it across society.
There's no question about it. Aaron, President Trump calls you and says, Aaron Wexler, I need some help telling Congress what should be in a like. What are the things that you think are the principles of immigration reform for you?
Oh God, well, I don't want to say the words H-1B around this crowd. I'm not sure I want to get into that, but no, in terms of immigration, I really think securing the border and getting rid of criminals in our country, it's just so basic that this doesn't have to be complicated. The left pretended it was overly complicated and that it was something we couldn't deal with, but we're already seeing the consequences of this. I know we're all watching the tracker to see how many people are getting deported, and people are complaining about the numbers and saying it should be higher. With due time, we're just getting started, but I want to see the profiles of all these criminals getting kicked out of our country and making the streets safer. And to the point of what we were talking about earlier with pricing, there's a lot that can be done with this administration to actually buffer the effects and the consequences of cheap illegal labor going into our goods, including the fact that we had the lowest oil and gas leases in history under Biden. And it would be very easy for us to actually just turn up, drill, baby, drill, and just make sure that prices are not really affected by this change in labor in our country. But also, people have acted like there's no consequence in our country to having illegals, as if the only cost is your avocados cost more or they cost less. And that's it. That's the zero-sum game here. And we know that's not true, exactly to the point of yesterday passing the Laken Riley Act. So I say keep it simple, keep the border secure, have legal immigration. It's really, really easy.
Okay. Well, no, we got to establish, I think, some point the tenets of what America First immigration. The biggest mistake I think like each party makes when they get control is punting on issues. Like right now, we have 2 years. We know we control everything. Jam the key things through, because we don't want to lose the House, potentially the Senate, God forbid. And then we don't have the opportunity to fix it. And the Dems are now at the table talking about making everybody a citizen. I want to go back to the briefing room for a minute. I want to play this moment for everyone to see Reagan Reese in the briefing room getting questioned for everybody, because it was important. I think there's a broader point that I think is important to make here. But this was Reagan Reese in the briefing room on Karoline Leavitt's first briefing.
Reagan, since you're in the back row, I hear the back row hasn't gotten much attention in the last 4 years, so I'm happy to answer your question.
And I can project. Does the president intend to permanently cut off funding to NGOs that are bringing illegal foreign nationals to the country, such as Catholic Charities?
I am actually quite certain that the president signed an executive order that did just that, and I can point you to it.
Okay. So, Reagan, let me ask you, let's just break this down. You were sitting. Was that a free seat? Did the Daily Caller have a seat? That's probably the easiest thing. Do you guys get a seat?
Yes, we do. That is our seat. We are on a rotation with EWTN. So every other day, it's my day in the seat, and that is the back row to and from the right.
Okay. And so in 4 years, you had never been called on?
So I had actually been called on in January 2024, and it's really funny how this happened. There was a light dusting of snow in DC, and most schools shut down. Most people decided they didn't want to go to work because they were scared of the snow. But me being from upstate New York, I was like, I don't understand what's going on. There was still a press briefing, and so I was one of the only reporters that showed up to the press briefing, essentially leaving Karine Jean-Pierre no choice but to call on me. And I asked her when was the last time, or when the president planned on going back to the border. And she said, he's been to the border recently. And I said, that was a year ago. And that went viral, and we never interacted again.
Okay. How did you choose the question that you were going to ask? Were you ready? Did you say, like, no matter what, that was what you were going with? Or did you talk to your editors? Did you really want to drill down on that issue? What made you select that?
So, I mean, with the Trump administration and just knowing that we are going to get more access and that we are going to get more opportunities to ask questions. I mean, I've now asked 2 questions of President Trump, and that's more I interacted with President Biden in the year plus I was covering him. You just have a running list of things, and you're prepared at any moment because you've seen Karoline Leavitt now gaggle coming down that media row, what we call Pebble Beach on the White House campus, multiple times. That's something I never saw Karine Jean-Pierre do. Stephen Miller, I ran into Tom Homan yesterday. And so you always have these opportunities to ask these officials. This is an issue on the border. And the other question that I asked also had to do with vetting processes for refugees coming from countries such as Afghanistan and Syria. And being the border and the immigration, that's a super important topic for the base of the Daily Caller, which is essentially the people who voted for Donald Trump. And so this was something that me and my editors had talked about that we wanted to highlight. And what I heard from people after the briefing was that they had no idea that the president had taken action on such a topic in the flurry of his executive orders. And so getting to highlight that, and then the DHS yesterday, furthermore, freeze all grants to NGOs, I think was a great topic to get back in the news cycle and at the top of the news cycle.
Yeah, I agree. It was so refreshing. Bradley, I know the Daily Signal is getting its pass back to 10 briefings, and I think what she did to open it up beyond, and I want to get Aaron's take on that in a second, but Bradley, just how big of a deal was this for the Daily Signal?
Oh, it's a huge deal. I mean, this is how government entities shield themselves from transparency and from the public actually knowing what's going on. I think Trump and Karoline and the rest of the White House press team have definitely a leg to stand on to make that argument and say this is the most transparent White House in history. 8,000 applications or more at this point for that new media seat. That's fantastic. And what it shows you, Sean, is that this election was not only about politics and it wasn't only about the direction of the country politically. This was a continuing down the path of this cultural change that we're seeing, particularly in media. Why was the corporate media out to sink the Trump campaign at every possible turn? Why was everybody having a brat summer for corporate media? Well, it was because they knew that if Trump won the election off of an alternative media strategy, that it would show the American people that these people only have the power that you grant them. The gray lady is cashing in on 150 years of reputation, and their current staff and editors, they've squandered it. And so now where are people going to get their information? They're going to social media. They're going to alternative media sources like podcasts where people can have longer conversations like this one, Sean, where you give me more than 30 seconds to say what I think about an issue. That's what this shows.
Before I get to a quick lightning round, Aaron, are you one of those 8,000? Would you want to go up? You've got a big following. Everyone who's on Nod Lib Take, I think you always have a great perspective on things that a lot of times I go, hey, I never even thought of that. Would you be one of those 8,000 that put an application in to go to the White House?
I appreciate that, Sean. And no, I actually didn't apply. I think that my place in this space is in commentary and sticking to my videos. And so, as exciting as it is, and I've had a lot of people ask me if I'm doing it, I just don't think that's what I should be doing.
Yeah, and that's great. All right, quick lightning round because we got to get to winners and losers real quick. Tulsi, Kash Patel, and RFK. Quick yes or no. RFK gets confirmed, yes or no. Reagan Reese.
I love beef tallow, so yes.
Bradley, yes or no?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
Tulsi Gabbard. Reagan Reese.
Let's just say yes.
No, not let's say yes. Tell me whether or not, this is
the one that I'm the most nervous about.
Okay, I agree with you. I'm nervous about Tulsi Gabbard. Okay.
And so this is, I don't know.
All right, Bradley.
No.
Aaron.
No. But I want it to be a yes, to be clear.
I know. And this is not, we all want it to be a yes, just to be clear. All right, last one. Kash Patel, Reagan Reese, yes or no?
Yes, because he has definitely flown under the radar. And
Yes.
despite all of Democrats complaining, he looks like he's on a clear path to
I
confirmation.
agree. Bradley Devlin,
Yes.
Aaron Wexler.
Yes.
It's 4 yeses. All right, real quick. We got like 2 minutes left. We always do winners and losers, so try to keep this tight. Who do you think, Reagan, I'll start with you. Give me your winner and loser for the week.
Winner, Karoline Leavitt. I don't need to explain that. Loser, WHCA, because she broke their cute little rule that the first question has to go to the Associated Press of every briefing and tossed it to the new media.
Bradley Devlin.
Loser, me. Why? Because the winners are all sitting with me on this panel. Sean, you made me look like a real schmuck bringing me in here with superstars. Sean, you are everywhere. I listen to you in the car and WMAL. I see your ads all over TV. I'm reading about Erin in New York Magazine, where she makes our movement look absolutely badass.
I know, great. By the way, I apologize for that great story, and I know if you go to Instagram, you can find it. New Yorker, Erin, they were definitely jealous of the amount of fun you were having. That was my takeaway.
Yeah, thank you.
Wait,
yeah,
so you
our
did.
plot for cultural domination looks,
So wait,
looks
was that
fun
who
and
was
cool.
your winner?
And no, the winner is you three, Sean,
okay.
Aaron, and
All right.
Reagan. And of
All right,
course, Reagan
Aaron.
in the briefing room.
Now that you know you're the winner, Aaron, who else is a winner to you?
Okay, so the winner, I was going to say, is the girl, that beautiful girl on the cover of New York Magazine. What a week for her. Awesome. She deserves it. She looks phenomenal. She gave our movement just a great reputation from that. Loser, I would say.
Who is it?
They have her name. I don't remember it. They found her.
She's
She's
a girl somewhere.
Oh, okay. I thought you actually knew her.
Reagan is a sorority girl.
Who's the loser?
Yeah, she's like a 21-year-old SMU sorority girl who wants to go to law school. She looks wonderful. She looks healthy and happy. And, you know, if it were some leftists, they'd be some like pixie haircut freak. So it was good for our movement. And then loser of the week, I would say, even though he's kind of slid under the radar, is Vivek Ramaswamy, who got absolutely roasted by Andrew Schultz on his show over the whole H-1B fallout.
Well, wait. So I didn't see this. So tell me. So Vivek was on what show?
Vivek was on Andrew Schultz's pod. And and Andrew Schultz just, you know, you can't go on with a comedian / podcaster who's, they're obviously going to call you out. And so Vivek is talking about running, you know, possibly running for governor. I don't know if that came up in the conversation, but he was trying to dance his way around the issue and make it seem like he wasn't
All right,
pushed out.
I will download that today. Now, see, this is it. Now I got a story from you and a podcast to listen to.
Yeah.
All right, here's my winner of the week. Independent media. I think it's been something that I've spoken about. I'm so excited what Karoline did, the briefing room, bringing back the hard passes and continue to expand transparency and access, and actually standing up for the First Amendment, which is all those bozos in the White House Correspondents Association fully claim to support. That's why Reagan's laughing. The losers for me are cell phones in schools, because they're finally starting to get banned around the country, and I'm so happy to see this. You talk about anxiety and I mean, like what that does to help kids learn is so amazing. Anyway, I love this show. I love Thursdays because the panel's so much more fun. Anyway, great conversation, great stuff. Thank you guys for being here on such a somber day. Remember, as I said earlier, go to SeanSpicer.com, sign up for the weekly newsletter. It's free. VIP members are always welcome. Share it with other people. Remember the morning meeting, always live at 9 a.m. We'll see you back here tomorrow on the Sean Spicer Show.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.